one piece in all this I want to understand more is the relationship between shadow and other, because by shadow you don't mean all of the sort of negative habits and sort of limiting factors in the psyche. You're meaning that's a specific part, but what are the other, I mean, would you say that's the primary obstacle on the path, or is it just one piece, and what are some of the other elements, which I think we'll just, if we see other elements, it'll help us understand even shadow's role more specifically.
I think at this point in my training, and I think this question is just a great dialogue. I don't have a particularly fixed view on it, but I think in my own training right now, I'm kind of starting to subscribe to a developmental model that basically that we've already been talking about, which is kind of the formation of the separate self, and then just the very deep recognition in my own tradition of the Buddha, which was 3,000 years ago, that separate self is also a source of suffering. That it's the very belief in the separateness and in the very deep need of that separate self to substantiate, to protect, to defend, and that there's a certain suffering that is created out of that, and that in order to move forward, for us to move forward in our spiritual path, we have to start really understanding how to unlock that clinging. And, traditionally, Zen has two approaches, and one is kind of exhaustion. You sit long enough, you sit hard enough, you just give up. And that's like a kind of tried and true method for a really powerful, powerful, I don't know what the word is. Just
like leap beyond the... What do you mean? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's more like the framework just collapses. The construct of self collapses, and then there's also the sudden kind of where your awareness is just all of a sudden boom woken up in a really direct way that also you just see that so clearly that it's not your true identity, and that all the strategies and ways we've developed to hold on to that is simply creating suffering for yourself and for others. And I think that in an integral practice, we can see that really having a very powerful spiritual practice that helps move us beyond that identification, because it's so deep, it's so ingrained, it's so habitual, that without a really powerful practice and teacher who can reflect that to you, you're going to keep kind of reverting to that. And at the same time, we might take up a type practice, because in an integral practice we want to look at the all of AQUL, the quadrants, levels, structural development, lines of development, states, and, having conversations about state development and who are very good at giving state experiences. And then finally, types. So, for instance, you could use the Enneagram to really start to see the very particular patterns of your egoic clinging, and how my clinging might have to do with caretaking others as a way of substantiating myself, whereas your type of ego clinging might have to do with dominating others, for instance. Mm-hmm. Like maybe I'm a 2 and maybe you're an 8, or maybe you're a 1, and so a quality of perfectionism and keeping everything in order. And that when we look at the particular quality as both a beautiful phenomenon on the one hand, because each of us is unique, and it's a really deep part of the path for me to really acknowledge the beauty of the conundrum and the problem, and just how beautiful and crazy and gorgeous we all are in our specificity.